What happens when the heiress to a billion-dollar empire, a young woman given every advantage in the world, finds herself utterly lost? Amelia Vance, daughter of the formidable CEO Eleanor Vance, had access to the best tutors, the most prestigious schools, and a future handed to her on a silver platter. Yet she was failing. Not just one test, but every test of her life. Her descent into failure was as spectacular as her family's rise to success. But her redemption wouldn't come from a high-priced consultant or a renowned therapist. It came after hours in the echoing silence of a skyscraper from a man the world saw as invisible, the single dad janitor. This is the story of how starting at zero can be the only way to truly reach the top. The air in Eleanor Vance's penthouse office on the 88th floor of the Vance Innovations Tower was worth more per cubic foot than most people's homes. It was triple-filtered, infused with a subtle custom-designed scent of white tea and bergamot, and chilled to a precise 21 degrees Celsius. From her sprawling desk of polished obsidian, Eleanor could survey her kingdom, the steel and glass heart of Manhattan. Below her, the city was a complex, glittering circuit board, and she was its master programmer. Eleanor Vance was a titan, a name whispered with a mixture of reverence and fear on Wall Street. After her husband, the brilliant and beloved Richard Vance, had died in a sudden accident 5 years prior, the world had watched, expecting the company to falter. Instead, Eleanor had grabbed the reins with a grip of steel, not just sustaining the empire, but doubling its value. She was sharp, relentless, and she did not tolerate failure, which is why the document glowing on her tablet felt like a personal venomous attack. It was a formal letter from the admissions board of the Wharton Young Leaders Accelerator program, while Ms. Vance's academic record and extracurricular portfolio are extensive. Her performance during the final simulation and interview process demonstrated a fundamental lack of practical application, strategic initiative, and frankly, basic problem-solving skills. It is with regret that we must decline her application. It was the 5th rejection that year. MIT's entrepreneurial incubator, Stanford's tech fellowship, a coveted internship at Bain & Company. Each rejection was a fresh cut deeper than the last. Her daughter Amelia Vance, the sole heir to a technology and real estate empire worth north of $12 billion, was by all objective measures a failure. Amelia was waiting in the antechamber, a space designed to intimidate senators and rival CEOs. She sat on a leather sofa that cost as much as a new car, staring at a priceless Rothko on the wall without seeing it. At 19, she had her father's kind eyes and her mother's elegant bone structure, but they were framed by a listlessness, a permanent cloud of apathy. She scrolled through her phone, past pictures of friends on yachts in the Mediterranean, friends starting their own non-profits, friends who seemed to effortlessly glide through the world. The door hissed open. "Amelia!" Eleanor's voice wasn't loud, but it cut through the silence like a scalpel. She stood in the doorway, a vision of tailored power in a charcoal-grey Dior suit. She didn't invite Amelia in. She simply held the tablet out. Amelia didn't need to read it. She could see the verdict in the tight clench of her mother's jaw. "I'm sorry." She mumbled the words, tasting like ash. "Sorry." Eleanor's laugh was a dry, brittle thing. "Sorry doesn't get you a seat at the table, Amelia. Sorry doesn't impress a board of directors. Sorry is what the people we acquire say." She strode into the room, her heels clicking like judgment against the marble floor. "I don't understand. I gave you everything. The best tutors since you were 6. Dr. Albright for macroeconomics, a former presidential advisor, Madame Dubois for conversational French, just in case. We built a mock trading floor in the East Wing. You have access to resources that countries would envy. And you can't even pass a simulation. It's not that simple, Amelia said, her voice small. They asked me to build a business plan from the ground up, with a budget of only $5,000. And your father and I started this company with less than that in a garage in Palo Alto. I know, but Amelia trailed off. How could she explain it? The numbers on the page were just abstract concepts. Budget, supply chain, market penetration. They were words she could define for a test, but they felt like a foreign language. When faced with the blank slate of the simulation, her mind had been a perfect, pristine void. She had frozen. You froze? Eleanor finished for her, her voice dripping with disappointment. You have the Vance name. You have the capital. You have the network. The one thing you are supposed to have, the one thing I need from you is the drive, the intelligence, the killer instinct your father had. She paused, her eyes scanning her daughter, as if looking for a flaw in a product line. It seems that was the one asset not passed down. The word struck Amelia with physical force. She flinched, her carefully constructed wall of indifference cracking. That was the core of it all. She wasn't her father. She wasn't her mother. She was a pale imitation, a faulty copy. Every society party, every charity gala. Eleanor continued, her voice lowering into a dangerous calm. People ask about you. How is Amelia? Is she ready to join the board? And I have to smile and talk about your gap year or your creative pursuits. Do you have any idea how humiliating it is to have to lie about my own daughter? Amelia stood up, a spark of defiance finally igniting. Maybe if you ever asked me what I wanted, instead of telling me what I should be. What you want? Eleanor looked genuinely bewildered. You want for nothing, Amelia. Your life is a dream. Other people have wants. You have obligations. You have a legacy to uphold. Your father didn't build this empire so his daughter could, find herself, write bad poetry. The argument was a familiar, well-worn path that always ended in the same place, Amelia retreating into her shell, and Eleanor returning to her work, the chasm between them wider than ever. That night, Amelia couldn't sleep. The silence of her impeccably designed bedroom felt suffocating. It was a museum of a young woman's life, not a place that was lived in. Trophies for equestrian events, she hated first edition books, she'd never read, a state-of-the-art design tablet she never touched. It was all a testament to a person she was supposed to be. Slipping on a simple pair of jeans and a hoodie, she left the penthouse. She didn't take the private elevator. Instead, she took the service stairs. The cold concrete and bare bulbs, a stark contrast to the polished world above. She needed to escape, to breathe air that wasn't conditioned and controlled. She walked the silent, empty halls of Vance Tower, a ghost in her own kingdom. The building was asleep, but it was still alive, humming with the low thrum of servers and ventilation. On the 45th floor, the main R&D department, she saw a light on in the communal kitchen area. The cleaning crew usually finished by midnight. Curiosity pulled her forward. As she rounded the corner, she saw a man on his hands and knees, meticulously scraping a stubborn black scuff mark from the pristine white linoleum. Next to him, a young boy, maybe 10 years old, was carefully wiping down the stainless steel counters, his movements practiced and efficient. A small portable speaker played a soft classic rock song. The man looked up, his expression one of mild surprise, not alarm. He had kind, tired eyes, flecked with grey, and a face that suggested he smiled more often than he frowned. "Sorry, miss. Didn't see you there. We'll be out of your way in a moment." "No, it's fine," Amelia stammered, feeling like an intruder. I was just walking." The boy looked at her, then back at his father. "Dad, you missed a spot." He pointed with his cloth to a small smudge on a refrigerator door. The man chuckled. "Good eye, Leo. You've got manager potential." He stood up, wiping his hands on a rag tucked into his belt. "Ben Carter," he said, offering a hand. It was calloused but clean. "Amelia," she replied, shaking it. She left off her last name. Here in the middle of the night, she didn't want to be a Vance. "Well, Amelia, this is my quality control supervisor, Leo," Ben said, ruffling his son's hair. Leo ducked away, embarrassed but pleased. "Why are you here so late?" Amelia asked, gesturing at the boy. "His sitter cancelled last minute," Ben explained without a hint of complaint. "And Leo here likes to help. Says it's better than homework. We make a good team. Don't we, champ?" "Yeah," Leo said, puffing out his chest a little. "I'm in charge of all surfaces below 4 feet. Amelia watched them, a strange ache in her chest. The easy camaraderie, the shared task, the quiet dignity of the work. There was more warmth and life in this brightly lit kitchen than in her entire penthouse. Ben went back to the scuff mark, not with frustration, but with a focused patience. He tried a different solvent, worked at it from a new angle. "What caused that?" Amelia found herself asking. "Someone dragged a metal crate," Ben said, not looking up. "Probably in a hurry. Didn't think about the floor. Most people don't. They just see the destination, not the path they're leaving behind." The simple observation landed on Amelia with surprising weight. She thought of her mother, of herself, always focused on the grand destination, the board seat, the legacy, while scuffing and scarring everything in their path. "There," Ben said, finally standing up. The scuff was gone. The white linoleum was flawless, a perfect, unbroken square. You can't just attack a problem head-on. Sometimes you have to break it down. Find the right tool. Understand what you're working with. You have to start at 0. He smiled at the floor, a smile of genuine, uncomplicated pride. Amelia stared at the clean white square, and for the first time in a very long time, she didn't feel like a failure. She felt like she was standing on the edge of something she desperately needed to understand. 0. The phrase, "start at 0, echoed in Amelia's mind for days. It was a concept so alien to her existence. Her life had started at 1 billion. She'd never known a 0. She'd never had a blank slate. Her life was a canvas, already crowded with the bold, aggressive strokes of her parents' ambitions. Driven by an impulse she didn't fully comprehend, she found herself back on the 45th floor, 2 nights later. The building was quiet again, the hum of its machinery, a mechanical lullaby. She found Ben and Leo in a different section this time, sorting through the massive recycling and waste bins from the design labs. Leo was meticulously separating different types of plastics, reading the small numbers inside the triangles, while Ben broke down large cardboard mock-ups with a box cutter. Back for another late-night stroll, Ben asked, his tone friendly and uninterrogative. "I couldn't sleep," Amelia said, which was true. "What are you doing?" "Sorting," Leo answered before his dad could. "This is peat plastic number 1. It can become a carpet. This one is HDPE number 2. It can be a new bottle. But if you mix them up, they just become trash." He held up 2 different clear plastic containers that looked identical to Amelia. Ben smiled. "My son, the future materials scientist. He's right. You can have 1,000 pounds of the most valuable recyclable plastic, but if one person throws a greasy pizza box in, the whole batch can be ruined. Contaminated. You have to get the foundation right. Everything has to be clean before it can become something new." Amelia looked at the mountain of discarded materials, blueprints for failed products, prototypes of sleek electronics that would never see the light of day, coffee cups from 100-hour work weeks. It was the refuse of innovation, the failures. And here was Ben Carter patiently sorting through it, finding value where everyone else saw garbage. "Can I help?" The question surprised her as much as it did Ben. Ben paused, looking at her soft, uncalloused hands and her expensive silk blouse. He saw the genuine, desperate curiosity in her eyes. It was the same look he'd seen in young architects, staring at a complex structural problem, a look of wanting to understand how things fit together. "Sure," he said, handing her a pair of work gloves from his cart. "You can be in charge of breaking down the cardboard. Flatten it completely. Remove all the tape. Tape contaminates the paper pulp." For the next hour, Amelia worked. It was mindless physical labor, ripping tape-scoring cardboard with a blade, the satisfying thud as a large box collapsed flat. Her muscles, unused to such work, began to ache. She got a paper cut. But with every box she flattened, a small knot of anxiety in her chest seemed to loosen. She wasn't Amelia Vance, the failed heiress. She was just a person doing a task, a simple, understandable task with a clear beginning and a clear end. Leo, seeing she was a novice, came over. "You have to cut along the grain of the corrugation," he advised her, his small face serious. "It's stronger that way, more efficient." She listened, and he was right. The simple advice made the work twice as easy. A 10-year-old boy had just taught her a lesson in efficiency that none of her 6-figure tutors ever had. They worked in a comfortable silence, punctuated by the rip of tape and the rustle of plastic. It was during a break, as Ben shared a thermos of hot chocolate with them, that Amelia began to talk, not about her failures or her mother, but about the building. "I grew up in this tower," she said, looking out the panoramic window at the city lights. "My dad used to bring me here when it was just a construction site. He'd stand right here and tell me that a building isn't just steel and glass. He said it was a living thing. It has a circulatory system, the plumbing and electrical, a nervous system, the data cables, a skeletal system, the steel frame." Ben listened, nodding slowly. "Your father was a smart man. He understood the fundamentals. Most people look at this," he swept his arm towards the view, "and see a symbol of power. He saw a system, an ecosystem. He tried to teach me." Amelia confessed, her voice barely a whisper. "He gave me books on urban planning, on engineering, but I was a kid. I didn't get it. Now you want to," Ben finished gently. Amelia nodded, feeling a prickle of tears behind her eyes. "My mother, she only sees the top, the 88th floor. She wants me to run the company, but I don't even know how the lights stay on." Ben capped his thermos, his expression thoughtful. "When my wife Sarah was sick," he began, his voice soft with memory, "the medical bills were astronomical. I was an architect back then, working for a big firm. High stress, long hours. I couldn't be there for her, not really. After she passed, I knew I couldn't keep living like that." "Not for Leo." Amelia stared at him, shocked. "You were an architect a long time ago," he said, with a wry smile. "I designed hospitals, schools, complex systems, but the most complex system I needed to manage was a little boy who just lost his mum. So I quit. I needed a job with clear hours, no deadlines chasing me home, something that let me be a father first and foremost. People see this job and they see a step down. For me, it was the only way to build a foundation that mattered." The confession hung in the air between them. Here was a man who had voluntarily walked away from a world of prestige and ambition for something more fundamental. He hadn't failed. He had chosen. He had assessed his life and started over at a different kind of zero. "I need to learn." Amelia said the words coming out with a sudden fierce urgency. I don't know what I need. But I think it starts here, on the ground floor. Can you teach me? Ben looked at this young woman, lost in a palace of her own making. He saw past the name and the money to the desperate yearning for purpose. He saw a flicker of her father's spirit, buried under years of pressure and expectation. I can't teach you how to be a CEO, he said slowly. I don't know the first thing about that. Amelia's face fell. But, he continued, a small smile playing on his lips, I can teach you how this building works. I can teach you about its systems, its weaknesses, its strengths. I can teach you how to see the whole ecosystem, not just the penthouse view. We'll start tomorrow. Be here. Midnight. And wear sturdier shoes. As Amelia took her private elevator back up to the 88th floor that night, she felt a terrifying, exhilarating flicker of hope. She was descending into the depths of her father's empire, to the boiler rooms and the sub-basements to learn from a janitor. It was the most illogical, counterintuitive, and undeniably right thing she had ever done. She was finally starting at zero. Amelia's new classroom had no desks, no smart boards, no Ivy League-educated professors. Her classroom was the sprawling hidden underbelly of Vance Tower, and her teacher was Ben Carter. Her curriculum was the building itself. Their first lesson took place in Sub-Basement 3, a cavernous concrete space that housed the building's primary water mains and filtration systems. The air was cool and damp, filled with the constant low hum of powerful pumps. Every person in this building, from your mother in her office to the barista in the lobby cafe, needs one thing to function clean water. Ben explained, his voice echoing slightly. He pointed to a massive, complex array of pipes, valves, and gauges. This is the heart. The water comes from the city, mains raw and untreated. It passes through sediment filters, carbon filters, UV sterilizers. Before it ever reaches a tap on the 88th floor, it has been through a dozen processes down here. He handed Amelia a wrench. See that pressure gauge? It's reading a little high on pump 2B. The filter is probably getting clogged. I need you to shut off the intake valve, bleed the pressure, and help me swap out the filter. Amelia stared at the tangle of pipes. It was an intimidating metal octopus. Which one is the intake valve? Figure it out, Ben said patiently. Look at the system. Follow the pipes. Where does the flow originate? Which valve would stop it without shutting down the whole system? There are schematics on that wall if you need them. For 20 minutes, Amelia felt the familiar frustration of failure creeping in. She traced pipes with her finger, getting lost in the complexity. She looked at the schematics, which were a dizzying web of lines and symbols. Her tutors would have simply pointed to the valve and told her its name. Ben just stood by, watching, offering no answers, only quiet encouragement. Finally, she stopped trying to memorize the whole system and focused on the one pump. She saw the main pipe coming from the wall, the source. She followed it. She saw how it split with a valve, controlling the flow to each pump. Her eyes lit up. "That one," she said, pointing. "Show me," Ben said. With his guidance, she slowly, carefully turned the heavy cast-iron wheel of the valve. She bled the pressure, a loud hiss of air making her jump. Together they unscrewed the heavy filter, housing a torrent of murky water, spilling into the floor drain. The filter inside was thick with grit and sediment. "This," Ben said, holding up the filthy cartridge, "is what we protect the rest of the building from. Every single day. It's dirty, unseen work. But if we fail down here, the whole tower fails. The fancy restaurant on the 60th floor can't wash its lettuce. The trading floor on the 30th can't make coffee. Your mother can't get a glass of water." They installed the new filter, and Amelia tightened the final bolt. When they turned the valve back on the pressure gauge on pump 2B, settled into the green zone. She had done it. She had identified a problem, understood a small piece of a complex system, and fixed it. A surge of pride, more potent than any A+ she'd ever received, washed over her. Their lessons continued over the following weeks. Ben's classroom was constantly changing. One night they were on the roof inspecting the massive HVAC units that were the building's lungs. He made her clean the coils and explained how the air intake systems had to be calibrated to account for wind speed and pollution levels. Another night they were in the electrical hub, a room that crackled with latent power. Ben, a certified electrician as part of his building maintenance qualifications, showed her the massive circuit breakers. "You can have the most brilliant ideas in the R&D labs," he told her, "but without a stable, uninterrupted flow of power, an idea is just a thought." He made her trace a single circuit from the main breaker all the way to a single forgotten outlet in a storage closet on the 12th floor. It took her almost 3 hours, but when she finally found it, she understood the path, the literal line of energy that connected the macro to the micro. She learned about waste management, structural load-bearing points, the intricate logic of the elevator dispatch system. Ben taught her to read blueprints, to understand stress tolerances, to see the building not as a static object, but as a dynamic, interconnected organism. He never gave her the answers. He just gave her the tools and the starting point. Her perspective began to shift. Walking through the polished lobby, she no longer just saw marble and glass. She saw the subfloor heating system beneath the marble, the complex wind shear dampeners hidden within the glass curtain wall. She saw the immense, invisible effort required to maintain perfection. Her appearance changed, too. She started wearing practical jeans and work boots. Her hands, once soft and manicured, became calloused. She had a small grease smudge on her cheek she didn't notice, and a newfound confidence in her stride. The change did not go unnoticed by Leo. He often joined their lessons, doing his homework at a nearby table. He saw Amelia transform from a sad, quiet girl into someone who asked questions, who wasn't afraid to get her hands dirty. He started to see her as a friend, not just some mysterious lady from upstairs. He'd show her his drawings, and she'd show him the blueprints of the HVAC system, explaining it with an enthusiasm that was infectious. One evening, Ben brought out a small, wobbly table from the staff break room. "Final exam," he said with a grin. "What is it?" Amelia asked. "It's a table. It's broken." "Fix it." She looked at the table. One leg was shorter than the others, and the whole thing swayed precariously. Her old self would have said, "Throw it out and buy a new one." Vance Innovations probably spent more on coffee stirrers each day than this table was worth. But the new Amelia knelt down. She examined the joints. She saw that one of the metal brackets was bent. The screws had stripped the wood. She didn't just see a broken table. She saw a system of failed connections. She spent the next 2 hours in the building's workshop, a place she never knew existed. With Ben's quiet supervision, she found a new bracket. She learned how to use wood filler to repair the stripped holes. She carefully measured and cut a small piece of wood to brace the leg. She sanded, drilled, and screwed. Finally, she stood it up. She pushed on it. It was solid, rock solid. Leo came over and put his glass of water on it. It didn't spill. "You fixed it," he said, beaming. Amelia looked at the simple repaired table. It wasn't glamorous. It wasn't a multi-billion-dollar acquisition. But it was hers. She had taken something broken and, using her own hands and her own understanding, made it whole again. "You didn't fix a table, Amelia," Ben said, his voice soft with pride. "You learned the most important lesson. You don't always need to build something new and shiny from scratch. Sometimes the most valuable skill is knowing how to find what's broken in the system you already have, and having the patience and the skill to make it right. As she stood there, admiring her work, her phone buzzed. It was a text from her mother's executive assistant. "Vance requires your presence. Boardroom, 9 a.m. Sharp. Mandatory." A knot of dread formed in Amelia's stomach. Her secret life was about to collide with her real one. The final exam was over. The real test was about to begin. The contrast between Amelia's two worlds could not have been more jarring. At 3 a.m. she was in a dusty workshop, her hands smelling of wood glue and metal. At 9 a.m. she was seated at a 40-foot table of polished mahogany in the 87th floor boardroom. The air once again was filtered and chilled. Across from her sat her mother, Eleanor, flanked by two severe-looking men in dark suits, the company's COO and chief legal counsel. "Good of you to join us," Eleanor said, her voice devoid of warmth. Her eyes did a quick, dismissive scan of Amelia's appearance. She had tried her best, but a sleepless night and a healing blister on her thumb were hard to conceal. "I have been informed," Eleanor began her words precise and cold, "of your recent nocturnal activities. I've been given reports from security about you spending hours in the service levels with a janitor." She said the word janitor as if it were a contagion. "His name is Ben Carter." Amelia said, her voice steady, surprising even herself. "I don't care if his name is Rockefeller," Eleanor snapped. "You are the heir to this company. Your face is on the cover of the annual report, and you are spending your nights apparently learning how to scrub floors and sort garbage. Explain yourself." "I'm learning how the company actually works," Amelia replied, her confidence growing. "From the ground up, the way Dad did." The mention of her father struck a nerve. Eleanor's eyes flashed. "Do not compare your slumming it with your father's legacy. He was a visionary. He wasn't changing filters in the basement." "But he knew how they worked," Amelia countered, leaning forward. "He knew that if the filters failed, the whole system would be compromised. You talk about a penthouse view, but you can't see the cracks in the foundation from up here." Eleanor's expression hardened. "This is not some feel-good after-school special, Amelia. This is a multi-billion-dollar corporation, and your behavior is an embarrassment. It's a security risk. What's next? Will you be inviting the window washers over for dinner?" "Maybe I should," Amelia retorted, her voice rising. "Maybe they have a better perspective on the company's structural integrity than the VPs on the 75th floor." The COO, a man named Henderson, cleared his throat. "Eleanor, if I may, this is a distraction. We have a more pressing issue." Eleanor shot a final withering glare at Amelia before turning her attention to Henderson. "The Helios project," Henderson nodded grimly. "The material integrity tests from the Arizona proving grounds came back this morning. It's a catastrophic failure. The new composite building material, the one we've sunk nearly $1 billion into and based the entire Q4 forecast on, is unstable. Under thermal stress, it develops microfractures. It's useless. Worse than useless, it's a liability." The blood drained from Eleanor's face. The Helios project was her baby, a signature innovation meant to rocket Vance innovations into the green tech stratosphere. It was supposed to be her legacy, separate from her husband's. "How is that possible?" Eleanor demanded. "The lab simulations were perfect. The real world, it seems, is messier than the lab," the lawyer added dryly. "And to make matters worse, it appears someone leaked the negative test results. Our stock is down 9% in pre-market trading. Forbes is already running a story. The headline is, 'Eleanor's edifice complex crumbles.'" Amelia watched her mother, A woman she had always seen as invincible suddenly looked vulnerable. The Titan had a crack in her armor. The apathetic part of Amelia felt a grim satisfaction, but the daughter in her felt a pang of fear. "Who is the primary competitor in this space?" Eleanor asked, her voice dangerously quiet. "Thorne Consolidated," Henderson answered. "Marcus Thorne. He's been trying to develop a similar composite for years." Eleanor's face went rigid. Thorne, of course. Amelia didn't know the name, but she saw the flicker of history in her mother's eyes. The meeting continued, a blur of damage control, legal jargon, and crisis management. Amelia was invisible to them again, a ghost at the table. They talked about share buybacks, press releases, and firing the entire R&D team responsible for Helios. It was all top-level abstract maneuvering. No one asked a simple question: why did the material fail? They just wanted to assign blame and manage the fallout. Finally, Eleanor dismissed them. She and Amelia were alone again in the vast, silent room. "This Carter," Eleanor said, her voice low and tight with controlled fury. "He's a distraction you can no longer afford. I've already spoken to HR. His employment is terminated effective immediately. He'll be escorted from the building today. I've arranged for a generous severance package on the condition he signs a non-disclosure agreement about his time with you." Amelia felt the floor drop out from under her. "What you can't? He's done nothing wrong. He has distracted you from your duties and exposed this family to ridicule," Eleanor stated, as if passing a final judgment. "And I will not have my daughter taking life lessons from the hired help. This conversation is over. You will go home, and you will begin studying for the GMATs with a new tutor who starts tomorrow." For the first time in her life, Amelia did not back down. The lessons from the basement, the quiet dignity of Ben's work, the solidity of the table she had fixed, it all coalesced into a core of unexpected strength within her. "No." Eleanor looked up, stunned. "What did you just say to me?" "I said no," Amelia repeated, her voice shaking but firm. "You're firing a good man because you're embarrassed. You're throwing money at the Helios problem, hoping it will go away. You're not looking at the real problem. You're not starting at zero." She stood up her chair, scraping against the floor. "You can fire him. But if you do, you'll be firing me too. I won't be your perfect, compliant heir anymore. I'll walk out of this building and I won't come back. Find someone else to uphold the precious Vance legacy." She turned and walked towards the door, her heart hammering against her ribs. Every instinct screamed at her to turn back, to apologize, to shrink back into the safety of her gilded cage. But she kept walking. She paused at the door, her hand on the handle. "And for the record," she said, looking back at her mother's shocked face, "Ben Carter has taught me more about value integrity and problem-solving in the last 3 weeks than you have in my entire life." She walked out the heavy door, clicking shut behind her, leaving Eleanor Vance alone in the silent boardroom, the fortress of her power suddenly feeling like a prison. The storm had not just gathered over Vance innovations, it had just broken right in the heart of the Vance family. Amelia didn't go home. She went down past the executive suites, the marketing floors, the legal department. She took the service elevator to the basement, her mind racing. She had just drawn a line in the sand, an ultimatum she wasn't sure she could back up. But she knew one thing: she couldn't let Ben be punished for her mother's blindness. She found him in the janitorial locker room, a small, clean space that smelled of disinfectant and coffee. He was quietly packing a small cardboard box with his personal effects, a framed photo of his late wife Sarah, another of Leo, a well-worn copy of Zen and the art of motorcycle maintenance. He wasn't angry or surprised, just a quiet, profound sadness in his eyes. "They already told you," Amelia said, her voice catching. "Henderson from HR came down himself. Very professional," Ben said with a tired smile. "They're giving me 3 months' pay. Leo's braces are paid for. It's more than fair." "Fair? It's not fair at all. This is my fault. I'll fix it. I'll go back to her. Amelia," Ben interrupted gently. "This isn't your fault. And it isn't your mother's, not really. This is just the way systems like this work. A foreign element is introduced," he gestured between them, "and the system tries to expel it to maintain its equilibrium. It's predictable." "But it's wrong," she insisted, the tears welling in her eyes. "You and Leo, this job, it's stable, it's important." "We'll be okay," he assured her. "We always are. But what about you? You just declared war on one of the most powerful women in the world." The question hung in the air. What about her? She had no plan, no resources of her own beyond a trust fund she suspected her mother could freeze with a single phone call. "I don't know," she admitted. "But I know what she's doing is wrong. The Helios project. It's failing, and everyone is just running around trying to manage the stock price. No one's trying to fix the actual problem." She explained the situation, the failed tests, the microfractures, the competitor, Marcus Thorne. Ben stopped packing his box. A strange, distant look came over his face at the mention of the name. Marcus Thorne. He repeated slowly the name, tasting like a bad memory. "You know him?" Amelia asked. "I used to," Ben said, his jaw tightening slightly. "A long time ago, back when I was an architect." He sank onto the bench, the box forgotten at his feet. "Marcus and I worked at the same firm, a prestigious place called Sterling and Croft. He was a brilliant materials engineer, but he was reckless, ambitious to a fault. He cut corners on safety protocols, fudged numbers on stress tests to make his designs look more innovative. Anything to get ahead." He looked up at Amelia, a new, intense light in his eyes. "There was a project, a pedestrian bridge. Marcus designed a new type of polymer for the support cables. Lighter, cheaper, he claimed it was stronger than steel. I was the lead architect. I ran my own independent analysis. My numbers showed that under certain vibration frequencies, the kind you'd get from heavy foot traffic, and wind, the polymer would degrade. I refused to sign off on it." "What happened?" Amelia asked, leaning in. "Marcus went over my head. He convinced the partners I was being overly cautious, a stick in the mud. They backed him. So I quit. I put my name on a formal letter to the city's engineering board warning them, and I walked away. I couldn't have my name on a project I believed was dangerous." "Was it 2 years later?" Ben said, his voice grim. "They had to close the bridge for a $10 million refit. They found microfractures in the polymer cables, exactly as my analysis predicted. The firm buried the story, settled out of court. Marcus had already left to start his own company, using a modified version of that same polymer technology as his foundation." A chill went down Amelia's spine. "Helios," she whispered. "It sounds like his old playbook," Ben mused. "Promise the world with a revolutionary material, but the fundamentals are flawed." He paused, a thought beginning to form. "The R&D for Helios. It all happened in this building, right?" "On the 45th floor," Amelia nodded. "Yes, in the new state-of-the-art lab." Ben's eyes narrowed. "Your father and I worked together briefly when this tower was being designed. I was a junior architect at the firm that did the initial structural plans before Vance Innovations took the whole project in-house. Richard Vance was obsessed with the foundation. He had a private lab built in the sub-basement, a place for his skunk works, projects. He wanted a space that was completely isolated from the building's main electrical grid and network to prevent any kind of corporate espionage. I never knew that, Amelia stammered. Few people did, Ben said. He called it the quarry, because that's where you get the raw materials. It was decommissioned years ago. It's just a storage space now, or it's supposed to be. He stood up, a new energy about him. The sad, defeated janitor was gone. In his place was the focused, analytical architect. Your mother thinks the problem is on the 87th floor in the boardroom, he said, his voice quickening. But you were right. The problem isn't up here, it's in the foundation. I think someone has been contaminating your project from the inside. Marcus Thorne. He's the only one who would benefit this much, and he knows how to manipulate materials science in subtle ways. A slight change in temperature during the curing process, a minor impurity introduced into the mixture, an altered algorithm in the testing machines. It wouldn't be enough to cause a failure in a controlled lab simulation, but in the real world, it falls apart. Amelia finished, her eyes wide with dawning comprehension. Someone inside Vance Innovations had to be helping him. Someone with access to the labs on the 45th floor. The leak of the test results wasn't a coincidence. It was a coordinated attack. Your mother fired the wrong man, Amelia said, a cold anger replacing her fear. She's getting rid of the one person who might be able to figure this out. Ben looked at the box at his feet, then at Amelia. He saw the fire in her eyes, the same fire he'd seen in her father's. Richard Vance had been a man who loved a good problem. She hasn't fired me yet, Ben said, a slow, determined smile spreading across his face. My shift doesn't end until 6 a.m. That gives us... He checked his watch. A little over 4 hours. Let's go to the quarry. He pushed the cardboard box back under the bench. He was no longer a janitor being let go. He was an architect, and someone was trying to tear down a building he had helped design. It was personal. Together they left the locker room, not as a failed heiress and a fired janitor, but as a team with a single desperate purpose to dig into the foundations of Vance Tower and find the rot that was threatening to bring it all down. The entrance to the quarry was exactly where Ben's old blueprints said it would be, a featureless steel door hidden behind a row of obsolete server racks in the building's 4th sub-basement. The electronic keypad was dark, lifeless, for over a decade. No power, Amelia stated. Your father believed in analog backups, Ben said, prying open a small panel beside the door to reveal a series of mechanical tumblers. It wasn't a simple combination, but an engineering puzzle. It's keyed to the building's core specifications. Amelia leaned in her eyes, scanning the dials. Weeks of studying the tower's hidden language had prepared her for this moment. The foundation concrete has a 5,000 psi rating, she said, turning the first tumbler. The grade of the primary load-bearing steel is 50 takta. She continued, adjusting another. She rattled off a sequence of figures: wind shear, tolerance, thermal expansion coefficients, her fingers moving with practiced confidence. With a final heavy thunk, the lock disengaged. The door groaned open, revealing a large, dust-filled laboratory, a perfect time capsule from her father's era. Old whiteboards were covered in faded equations, and prototypes of early Vance tech sat on shelves like museum artifacts. In the center of the room was a suite of high-end analog lab equipment. A ghost lab. Ben breathed, flipping a heavy breaker switch. A backup generator coughed to life, and the old machines began to hum. Completely isolated from the tower's network and power grid. Untraceable. Your father built this place to be invisible. Their plan was audacious and simple. They needed to prove the Helios composite was sabotaged. The failed samples from the Arizona test are locked in the legal department. Amelia reasoned her mind, working with a new, sharp clarity. But the control samples and raw materials are in the R&D lab on the 45th floor. That has to be our target. It'll be guarded, Ben warned. The night supervisor Sal takes a personal call in the west stairwell every night at 3:15 a.m. Amelia said, surprising Ben. Leo mentioned it. It gives us a window. While Ben coaxed the old equipment back to life, Amelia donned a janitor's uniform and made her way to the 45th floor. Her heart hammered against her ribs, but her purpose was clear. This wasn't an abstract simulation. It was a real problem with a real solution. Using Ben's master keycard, ironically set to be deactivated at dawn, she slipped into the gleaming Helios lab. Inside, she moved quickly to the refrigerated unit, holding the raw polymer resins. The project files specified a key ingredient component, 7B. She found the vial, but her eyes caught something else. Pushed to the back of the shelf, partially obscured, was an almost identical container, labeled Component 7B Cal. Calibration. Her instincts, honed by weeks of looking for the smallest anomalies in the building's systems, screamed at her. Acting on this powerful hunch, she drew a sample from both containers before slipping back into the shadowed halls. Back in the quarry, the ghost lab was humming. They placed her samples under the powerful scanning electron microscope. The image from the standard component 7B was exactly what the lab reports showed, a perfect interwoven lattice of polymer chains. But when they displayed the sample from the hidden Cal vial, they both gasped. "There," Ben whispered, pointing to the monitor. The lattice was polluted with minuscule dark spots. "It's a foreign agent, an oil-based catalyst." He quickly deduced its function. It's designed to be inert during lab tests, but would activate under real-world thermal stress, like the Arizona sun. It would break down the polymer bonds from the inside out. It's sophisticated molecular-level sabotage. Someone was swapping the pure resin with this tainted version for the production runs sent to the proving grounds. The saboteur had to be a trusted senior chemist. But who? "We're looking at this from the top down," Amelia said, remembering her first lesson with Ben. "Let's look at the garbage." They retrieved the sealed hazardous waste bins from the 45th floor lab, the ones containing discarded gloves, wipes, and flawed mixture samples. The smell was acrid as they began the tedious process of sorting and testing. In the third bin, they found it a pair of nitrile gloves and a chemical wipe, both heavily contaminated, with the unique signature of the sabotage agent. The bin was labeled with its point of origin, Lab Station 4. Amelia's fingers flew across a terminal keyboard, pulling up personnel files. "Lab Station 4 is assigned to Dr. Alan Corrigan," she announced. A photo of a quiet, unassuming man appeared on the screen. He had been with the company for 15 years. Using her family's credentials, Amelia dug deeper into his financials. Her blood ran cold. "Ben, look. 3 weeks ago, $2 million had been deposited into Corrigan's offshore account from a shell corporation. The corporation's name was Bridgefront Holdings." Ben stared at the screen, his face hardening. "The pedestrian bridge," he said the words full of old anger. "Marcus Thorne, he's sending a message." They had it all: the science, the motive, the money trail, and the man. The clock on the wall read 8:45 a.m. The emergency board meeting was starting. Amelia didn't bother to change. She strode into the 87th floor boardroom, wearing the janitor's uniform, a symbol of the world her mother had dismissed. The entire board, her mother included, stared at her in stunned, angry silence. "You are late and you are inappropriately dressed," Eleanor snapped. "Security, don't bother." Amelia said, her voice clear and steady, cutting through the tension. She placed a small hard drive on the polished mahogany table. "Before you vote to kill the Helios project and destroy 200 careers, you need to see what happens when you start at zero." As the room held its breath, Ben Carter stepped out from the doorway behind her, a small fractured piece of the Helios composite held in his hand. The architect's ghost had returned to protect the foundation. The fallout was immediate. Dr. Corrigan was arrested at his workstation, and his confession implicated Marcus Thorne in a spectacular case of corporate espionage. As Thorne's empire crumbled under lawsuits and federal investigation, Vance Innovations' stock soared to an all-time high. But the real victory wasn't on the trading floor. It was in the silent boardroom after the chaos had subsided. Eleanor approached her daughter, not as a CEO but as a mother seeing her child clearly for the first time. "I was wrong," Eleanor said, her voice heavy with the weight of her admission. "I spent years trying to force you into my world, the world of the 88th floor. I never realized you had your father's heart. He was always in the workshop in the foundation. I was so afraid of losing his legacy that I couldn't see it was standing right in front of me." She finally embraced Amelia, a hug that closed a chasm of misunderstanding. "I am so proud of you." The next day, Eleanor summoned Ben Carter to her office. She offered a formal apology and a new, unique position, Director of Systems Integrity, with a mandate to find and fix problems at every level of the company. Ben looked not at the generous salary on the contract, but at a photo of his son Leo on his phone. "I accept," he said, "on 2 conditions. First, my hours are built around my son. I'm a father before anything else." Eleanor agreed without hesitation. "And second," Ben added, "my first hire and partner is Amelia Vance. She's the one who taught me we needed this department." And so a new foundation was laid at Vance Innovations. The Department of Systems Integrity, nicknamed the Quarry, became the company's heart, operating from the old sub-basement lab. Amelia and Ben were a dynamic team, their work guided by a simple principle: understand the system from the ground up. Amelia, no longer a failed heiress, thrived finding purpose, not in power, but in making things work. The rigid corporate hierarchy gave way to a culture of shared responsibility. The Vances and the Carters became an unlikely family. Dinners were shared, stories were told, and the sterile penthouse began to feel like a home. Eleanor learned to value the quiet strength of the janitor who had saved her company and the daughter who had saved her heart. One afternoon, Amelia and Ben stood on the tower's roof, looking out at the city. "Do you ever miss being an architect?" she asked. Ben smiled, his gaze warm with pride as he looked at her. "I never stopped," he replied. "I'm just building with different materials now. And this," he gestured to her, to the thriving, changed company around them, "is the best thing I've ever built." Amelia finally understood. Success wasn't about the height you reached, but about the strength of the foundation you stood upon. And the strongest foundations were always built from zero. The story of Amelia Vance and Ben Carter reminds us of a powerful, often forgotten truth. True strength isn't found in privilege or power, but in humility and understanding. It teaches us that to truly fix a problem, whether in a company, a family, or our own lives, we can't just look down from the top. We have to be willing to go into the basement to get our hands dirty, and to learn from the quiet wisdom of those who do the essential, invisible work. It's a reminder that starting at zero isn't a failure. It's the most honest and powerful starting point of all. If this story resonated with you, please give this video a like to help it reach others who might need to hear this message. Share it with someone who appreciates a story of hope and redemption. And don't forget to subscribe to our channel for more heartwarming and inspiring stories that explore the real meaning of success and the human spirit. Thank you for listening.